The Mwansa family gathered at their grandmother Agnesa's grand mansion in Lusaka, the air thick with pride and hidden grudges. Outside, luxury cars gleamed in the night, and inside the dining hall, gold chains, glittering dresses, and designer suits flashed at every turn. Everyone showed off their wealth, speaking loudly about business trips and shopping abroad. But there was one person who stood out for the opposite reason. Chipo, the quiet granddaughter, walked in wearing a simple dress, her hair tied back, no jewelry at all. She slipped into her chair unnoticed, as cousins rolled their eyes and aunties whispered that she had brought nothing to the table, as usual. As food was served, the teasing began. "Chipo, do you even work?" one cousin smirked. Another added, "She must be living off scraps." Laughter spread across the table. Until their grandmother leaned toward Chipo and asked in a gentle voice, "Is the $1,500 I send you each month still enough, child?" The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air, drinks paused halfway to lips. Cousins choked, uncles stared, aunties exchanged shocked looks. For years they believed Chipo was broke, but now they learned Grandma had been secretly sending her money. Questions flew like knives. Why her? What has she done to deserve it? She's manipulating you with fake humility. But Grandma only sipped her tea and stayed calm, her sharp eyes watching the panic grow. Chipo lowered her gaze and smiled softly, saying nothing, and her silence only made the room burn hotter with suspicion. Laughter filled the long dining table as the Mwansa cousins found their favorite target. Chipo, sitting quietly at the far end, was once again the subject of their cruel jokes. "Tell us, cousin," one of the young men smirked, "how does it feel to live off scraps while the rest of us shine?" Another cousin leaned back in her chair and added loudly, "She probably counts coins just to buy bread." Their laughter spread, and a few aunties joined in with smug smiles, enjoying the mockery as if it were part of the meal. Chipo didn't answer. She kept her eyes low, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if their words slid off her like rain on glass. But just as the insults grew louder, Grandma Agnesa set down her fork and leaned toward Chipo. Her voice was soft, but in the silence that followed it carried through the room like thunder. "Is the $1,500 I send you each month still enough, child?" The effect was instant. A cousin froze mid-laugh, his fork hanging in the air. One auntie gasped so hard she nearly spilled her wine. Another cousin choked on a piece of meat, coughing as everyone turned to stare. The entire table went quiet. It was as if the walls themselves had stopped breathing. No one had expected this. For years, the family believed Chipo had nothing. They dismissed her simple clothes, her quiet presence, her refusal to brag like the others. But now they realized the truth, Grandma had been secretly sending her money. The cousins exchanged wide-eyed looks, their shock quickly twisting into envy. "Wait," one of them muttered, "she gets money every month." An uncle slammed his hand on the table and demanded, "Why her, Mama? Why not us? We are the ones who built this family name." Another cousin leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "She must be manipulating you," he hissed. "All that fake humility is just an act. She's playing us all." The room buzzed with whispers, theories, and bitter suspicions. But Grandma Agnesa did not flinch. She lifted her teacup with steady hands and took a long, calm sip, her sharp eyes scanning each angry face at the table. Chipo still hadn't spoken. She only lowered her gaze further, a small smile tugging at her lips. That quiet smile drove the family mad. They wanted answers, explanations, anything to prove that Grandma's trust was misplaced. Instead, all they saw was Chipo's silence, and it scared them more than her words ever could. The silence after Grandma's words felt heavy, but it did not last long. Soon the room exploded with noise. One uncle leaned forward, his face red with anger. "Why her? Why not us?" he shouted. "We are the ones who built this family name. We sacrificed, we worked, and yet she is the one you choose." An auntie quickly joined in, pointing her finger across the table. Exactly. My children carry them once a pride, not this girl who hides in the shadows. What has she done to deserve even a single coin from you? The cousins smirked, smelling blood in the air. It's obvious, one said with a sneer. She's been tricking Grandma with her poor little act. Dressing simple, keeping quiet, making everyone think she is innocent. But behind that fake humility, she's clearly manipulating her. Another cousin clapped mockingly. Bravo, cheapo. You fooled the queen herself. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel, but it was also desperate, a cover for their growing fear. Cheapo sat still, her hands folded in her lap. She did not look up, nor did she defend herself. Her silence felt louder than their accusations, and it unsettled them even more. The cousins leaned closer, whispering theories among themselves. She must be keeping a secret account. She's trying to win the inheritance. She's plotting against us all. Through it all, Grandma Agnesa did not raise her voice or slam the table like they did. She simply sipped her tea with slow, steady movements, her gold rings catching the light as her sharp eyes traveled from one face to another. She looked at them like a hawk watching prey, calm but powerful, and it only made the family more uneasy. The panic grew. One uncle pushed back his chair so hard it scraped loudly against the floor. Mother, this is not fair. You should be supporting us, your bloodline, not wasting money on someone who contributes nothing. An auntie clutched her necklace dramatically and cried, You never gave me such gifts when I was struggling. Why should she enjoy what we never had? But Grandma did not move. She let their voices rise higher and higher until the dining hall was full of shouts, accusations, and bitterness. Then, without a single word, she placed her teacup back onto its saucer with a quiet clink. The sound cut through the noise. Everyone froze, their rage hanging in the air, as Grandma's piercing eyes reminded them all who truly held the power at that table. The room was still buzzing with shouts when all eyes finally turned to Cheapo. They waited for her to defend herself, to explain, to fight back against the insults. But Cheapo didn't say a word. She only looked down at her plate and let a small, quiet smile appear on her lips. That simple smile spread through the dining hall like fire. It was not loud, it was not proud, but it carried a weight that words could not. The family could not stand it. Why is she smiling? One cousin hissed under her breath. Another cousin leaned forward, whispering sharply, She must have a hidden account somewhere. That money Grandma gives her, she's using it to build something behind our backs. An auntie narrowed her eyes, her bracelets clinking as she waved her hand. Don't you see? She's using this act to trap Mama's loyalty. She pretends to be humble, but she's clever. Too clever. The whispers grew faster, mixing with anger and fear. An uncle slammed his palm on the table. Mark my words, he growled. She's planning to steal the inheritance. That's her game. She wants everything for herself. Cheapo's smile did not fade. She didn't lift her eyes. She sat still, calm, almost peaceful, while the storm around her grew louder. The cousins shifted uneasily in their seats. Some tried to laugh it off, but their voices cracked. The aunties kept glancing at one another, worried that the suspicion might be true. The uncles frowned deeply, already imagining Cheapo taking what they believed belonged to them. Grandma Agnesa watched in silence, her face unreadable. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers resting lightly on her teacup, as though she had been expecting this exact moment. The longer Cheapo stayed quiet, the more restless everyone else became. Finally, one cousin stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Cheapo. Why won't you speak? What are you hiding? Only guilty people keep quiet. His voice cracked with fear more than anger. Others joined in, pressing her for answers. Tell us the truth, Cheapo. What are you doing with that money? What are you plotting? Still, Chipo didn't give them the satisfaction of a reply. Her silence was like a mirror, forcing them to see their own greed and suspicion. The more they shouted, the smaller they seemed. And the more they raged, the calmer she looked. By the time Grandma gently set her teacup back onto its saucer, the family had worked themselves into a frenzy of doubt. Yet Chipo remained untouched, her quiet smile holding more power than all their voices combined. The questions kept flying at Chipo like arrows. One cousin shouted, "What are you doing with the money?" Another hissed, "Admit it. You're planning to take everything from us." The noise grew louder and louder until finally, Chipo lifted her head. Her calm eyes swept the table, and for the first time that evening, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. "It's not enough," she said. The family gasped. An auntie leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Not enough for what? For yourself? For more clothes? More land?" Chipo shook her head slowly. "Not enough for me, but not for me. It goes to pay for children's school fees in the villages." The room fell into a heavy silence. Every laugh, every whisper, every angry word stopped at once. Even the servants at the edge of the hall froze, their eyes wide. The cousins blinked in disbelief, as if they had misheard her. "What?" one finally asked, his voice cracking. Chipo looked straight ahead now, her face calm. "Every month, that money pays for children to go to school. It buys books, uniforms, meals. It helps small clinics in villages that no one in this family ever visits. It feeds orphans who have no family at all." Mouths dropped open around the table. The aunties who had mocked her seconds earlier could not speak. A cousin who had been sneering now stared at her in shock, his fork slipping from his hand onto the plate with a loud clang. An uncle leaned back in his chair, struggling to believe what he had just heard. Grandma Agnesa broke the silence with a proud nod. "Yes," she said firmly, her voice steady. "I knew what she was doing. I wanted to see what she would choose to do with little. And she chose to give." She looked around the table, her sharp eyes burning into each of them. "While the rest of you spend thousands on handbags, cars, and parties, this child spends on lives." The family sat stunned. No one had imagined that the quiet granddaughter they had laughed at was carrying such a burden. They had mistaken her silence for weakness, but now they saw it for what it was, strength. Chipo lowered her gaze again, her lips still holding that gentle smile, as if the chaos around her could never shake her peace. And in that silence, for the first time, the Mwansa family felt small in the shadow of her quiet power. The silence after Chipo's words did not last long. Soon the dining hall shook with voices again, only this time louder and sharper than before. One cousin slammed his fist so hard on the table that the glasses rattled. "You're wasting money on strangers," he shouted, his face twisted with rage. "While we, your own blood, are struggling to maintain our status. Do you know how expensive it is to keep respect in this city? And you give it all to outsiders." His voice cracked as envy burned in his eyes. Another cousin joined in, her voice trembling with fury. "We are family, Chipo. Family comes first. Those children you speak of mean nothing to us. Meanwhile, we are out here fighting to keep our names respected. And what do we get? Nothing." She threw her napkin across the table in anger. The aunties rose almost in unison, their jewelry clinking as they pointed fingers toward Grandma. "Mama, this is unfair," one cried. "You never gave us such money when we were struggling. You watched us suffer and yet she receives your support in secret." Another added, "Do you not care about your own children? Your daughters? Your blood?" Their voices overlapped in a storm of complaints, each louder than the other, as if volume could win them favor. The uncles grumbled too, shaking their heads. "This is favoritism," one muttered. "This will divide the family." Another spat bitterly, "It already has." The cousins kept shouting over one another, demanding answers, demanding shares, demanding what they believed was theirs by right. But in the middle of their chaos, Grandma Agnesa suddenly laughed. It was not a light laugh, it was sharp, bitter, almost frightening. The sound cut through their noise like a blade. Everyone froze, staring at her. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with disappointment. "Do you want to know why?" she asked slowly, her voice low but powerful. "Why I never gave you what you wanted?" No one answered. The room was still. Grandma's lips curled into a hard smile. "Because you spend on handbags, while she spends on humanity." Her words rang through the hall, echoing louder than any shout. "You waste fortunes on shoes and cars, showing off to people who do not even care. But she used every coin to feed children, to heal the sick, to educate the forgotten. That is the difference." The family sat stunned, their pride shattered. No one dared to speak. The only sound was the slow tick of the clock on the wall, marking the moment when the Mwanzas were forced to face the ugliness of their own greed. The room was still ringing with anger when Grandma Agnesa slowly raised her hand. The noise died down little by little, until only the sound of heavy breathing and clinking cutlery filled the air. Her face was calm, her back straight, and her eyes sharper than ever. She looked at each of them in silence before speaking. "Enough," she said firmly. "You all argue about what you deserve, but let me tell you something. The money I gave Chipo was never about charity. It was a test." The family froze. A cousin whispered, "A test?" But Grandma continued without pause. "Yes. That $1,500 was nothing compared to what this family owns. I wanted to see who among you carries not just our name, but also our heart. And now I have my answer." She set her cup down with a soft clink, then leaned back in her chair. "The true inheritance papers have already been signed. And the one who proved worthy is Chipo." The reaction was instant. Gasps shot across the table. A fork fell to the floor. One auntie clutched her chest as though the words had struck her physically. A cousin shouted, "No. This cannot be." Another cried out, "She tricked you, Mama. She fooled you with her act." But Grandma raised her hand again, silencing them with just her presence. Chipo, wide-eyed and shaken, finally found her voice. "Grandma, no. I never wanted," but Grandma cut her off, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a thick envelope and laid it on the table with a heavy thud. Papers spilled out, official seals, deeds, contracts. "These," she said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence, "show businesses, properties, and millions already placed in her name. I have built this empire with my sweat. And I will not leave it in the hands of greed. I will leave it in the hands of the one who showed heart." Every face around the table twisted in disbelief. The uncles whispered furiously to one another, the aunties covered their mouths in shock, and the cousins exchanged wild, panicked looks. But Grandma's eyes stayed fixed on Chipo, steady and proud. "You proved yourself," she said softly, almost like a mother to a child. "Not with words, but with actions. While they grabbed and showed off, you gave. That is why you will carry this family forward." The room felt colder, heavier. Some stared at Chipo with pure jealousy, others with betrayal. But the truth was now unshakable, the quiet granddaughter they had dismissed was the heir to everything. And no scream, no protest, could change what was already signed and sealed. The dining room erupted like a storm. Cousins screamed, uncles argued, and aunties wept as if the world had ended. Chairs scraped back, plates clattered, glasses shattered on the floor. Everyone shouted over each other, demanding, begging, accusing. Some pointed at Chipo with shaking fingers, others pleaded with Grandma to change her mind. The air was heavy with anger, envy, and disbelief. But in the middle of the chaos, Chipo sat still. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't defend herself. Quietly, she reached across the table and took her grandmother's hand. The simple gesture silenced the noise around her, at least in her heart. Grandma Agnesa turned to her fierce eyes softening just for that moment. She leaned closer, her lips brushing Chipo's ear as she whispered, "Let them choke on their forks. You'll feed the world." Chipo's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded gently. She understood what her grandmother meant. The greed of the family would consume them, but her path was different. She was chosen to build, not destroy. All around them, the meltdown continued. Plates cracked against the floor, cousins pushed back from the table in anger, aunties covered their faces in shame. Bitter glares cut across the room, but none could pierce the calm between grandmother and granddaughter. When the night finally ended, one truth hung in the air heavier than the silence. The girl they had ignored, mocked, and dismissed as nothing had become the most powerful person in the Mwanza dynasty. And no one could take it away from her.